28, 2022. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E, the members of Daly City Council and staff will participate in this meeting via teleconference. Members of the public are encouraged to watch the meeting via live stream, City Council meeting live stream at https://bit.ly/Daly City Feb 28 live stream, or on local channel 27 Comcast. I understand that I have one city council member, Councilwoman Jocelyn Manalo, that might be joining us later on. She is trying to arrive and get to this meeting, and we'll just go ahead and begin with our pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see. Ms. City Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Buenaventura,
Present.
Ms. DiGiovanni,
Present.
Ms. Manalo, Mr. Sylvester,
Glenn Sylvester, present.
Dr. Rod.
Present. Okay, so we have a set of presentations. One is proclaiming February 28, 2022 as Rare Disease Day. And I'll go ahead and take this. So the proclamation for Rare Disease Day is whereas there are nearly 7,000 diseases and conditions considered rare, each affecting fewer than 200,000 Americans in the United States, according to the National Institutes of Health. And whereas each of the disease may affect small numbers of people, rare diseases as a group affect almost 30 million Americans. Many rare diseases are serious and debilitating conditions that have a significant impact on the lives of those affected. And whereas more than 450 drugs and biologics have been approved for the treatment of rare diseases, according to the Food and Drug Administration, millions of Americans still have rare diseases for which there is no approved treatment. And whereas individuals and families affected by rare diseases often experience problems such as diagnosis delay, difficulty finding a medical expert, and lack of access to treatments or ancillary services. And whereas while the public is familiar with some rare diseases such as Lou Gehrig's disease and sympathetic to those affected, many patients and families affected by less widely known rare diseases bear a large share of burden of funding research and raising public awareness to support the search for treatments. And whereas thousands of residents of Daly City are among those affected by rare diseases, nearly 1 in 10 Americans have rare diseases. And whereas thousands of patients and caregivers, medical professionals, researchers, companies developing orphan products to treat people with rare diseases and others in the city of Daly City will participate in the observance of Rare Disease Day on February 28, 2022, organized nationwide by the National Organization for Rare Disorders. Now, therefore, I, Roderick Doss McWall, Mayor, and members of the City Council hereby proclaim February 28, 2022 as Rare Disease Day in the city of Daly City and encourage the Daly City community to recognize and support efforts in fighting against rare diseases. And I believe we have a couple of people, Matthew Abaya and Fred Briones, if you would like to say a couple of words.
Yes. First off, thanks again for recognizing Rare Disease Day in Daly City. Actually, I really want to have Fred speak because he is really a person who's been really spearheading a lot of the efforts here in the Bay Area.
Thank you, Matthew. And I wanted to thank you, Mayor, City Council, and Daly City. This is very important. Daly City has joined 10 other cities and 2 other counties in the Bay Area to recognize Rare Disease Day. I am a rare disease patient and a native of the Bay Area, and this really, really means a lot to the rare disease community. You know, Rare Disease Day is a global event to bring awareness to the rare disease community, and Daly City's commitment is one of the first steps to making sure that the rare disease community is heard. And I really, really want to send you my appreciation and let you know that this makes a big difference. We did a live stream event over the weekend, and we raised over $17,000 in 2 days. And Daly City's commitment was something that was very special to us. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I went to high school in Archbishop Burton High School, and I have many friends and family in Daly City, and Daly City is like my second home as well. I spent many nights playing tennis at Gellert Park and Ceremony Mall. So I really, really appreciate Daly City and their commitment to the rare disease community. So I thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to open it up to my colleagues on council, Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first want to say that it is so important that you brought this to our attention, because especially during COVID, where we know, I heard this even from doctors, that the rare diseases are always put on the back burner, much less now. So, and with the chronic vex, the long haulers, which cannot even be identified as well. And then sometimes it leads to neurological disorders that are unidentified, and everything's new on the horizon. And sometimes people that have those rare diseases, having known some as friends and family, and yourself included, I'm sure you become frustrated because sometimes they infer that it's in your head, or your symptoms are not valid, or it may not be chronic all the time, but sometimes, and then that's pretty heavy to take, because we know our bodies, we know our mind, and it can break people when people don't listen to them. And when you find doctors or specialists and you go to 20 of them, and only even if it's not a rare disease like lupus, and it still takes a long time, many tests, and you suffer both emotionally and physically, and you want to be heard. And so in Daly City, I'm proud that we're hearing you, we're here for you, and maybe next year we can get together in person and maybe promote in a different way altogether with my colleagues and help support those who need it the most, and recognize that you're not alone, that that we are here for you, and that during times of COVID, being isolated is not healthy. So, and offer the support. So I, for one, am very humble that you're here, and I know that the funding also needs to be there, like you said, and it gets ignored at the NIH level as well, and that those things need to be funded and not to be put on the back burner. So very humble, and thank you, Mayor, and to my colleagues, and we need to support one another in this world as a human being to begin with kindness and love. So thank you both for being here, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor Ray Buenaventura.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to address this comment to Matthew Abaya. Matthew, I read your email, and I read the story that was written about you.
Actually, that's Fred there. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. But I wanted to say that I read the story, and I read the email, and I was very touched by the article, and I had no idea what this Kennedy disease was. And so I think it's important that you guys brought this to light to make us more familiar with these kind of diseases and the struggles that you have gone through. And I just wanted to commend you for having the courage to reveal your story to us, to the public, to the press. And so, because without you being on here today, I would not have known about what Kennedy disease is. And so I want to thank you for sharing that. It is important for the community to know, and more importantly, it's important for them to mobilize so that people will know that there is a support system and there is an awareness and a concern for people that are suffering just like you. So thank you for putting yourself out there.
Any other of my colleagues? Councilmember Glenn Sylvester.
Thank you, Mayor. Fred, I've seen you around many times, and I'm glad you're here. I'm actually sorry about the circumstances of what I've heard. However, I'm happy for the awareness of bringing this up before council this evening. It was about 15 years ago, and I actually have 2 kids who are afflicted with a rare disease. And 15 years ago, when my daughter came home and she says she had these symptoms, me not being a doctor, and I just says, oh, maybe it's an abscess, go see a dentist. And as Councilmember Di Giovanni said, there are various symptoms, and you don't know unless the steps are taken to address those. And again, Councilmember Di Giovanni visiting many doctors, getting a second opinion, that can be long and tiring. And so I have to commend you, Fred, because in the times that I've seen you, I say to myself, I would have never known. And that's the problem nowadays. We need the awareness, and this is the first step in awareness. So keep up what you're doing, hang in there, and we will be here for you and the rest of the community. Do the best you can, and best of health to you, and long live Fred. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Glenn Sylvester. Matthew and Fred, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I agree with and in solidarity with you and with my fellow colleagues when we talk about, like, the first step is the education part and understanding the awareness of rare diseases. I think sometimes we'll see people that just look completely healthy, but there's a lot of things that people may suffer from, and it's not like a physical ailment, and there's also like rare diseases that can't be diagnosed. So I just want to say thank you for coming, bring this to my table, having the courage to speak and share your stories. First step is also just humanizing the narrative of rare diseases. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So the next up on our agenda is the general fund 10-year forecast update with Director of Finance, Tim Nevin, and City Manager, Shauna Maltby.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Tonight, staff is going to be presenting a general fund 10-year forecast update. You may recall, it's been almost a year. Time has been really flying, but in May of last year, we did provide a budget forecast update to council. And tonight, I'm in just a second going to hand it over to our Director of Finance, Tim Nevin, to get into the details and talk about some of the changes that we've seen in projections and revenues and expenses, and what staff is doing to help council with some upcoming decisions. Tonight is presentation only, so we are not seeking approval or direction. However, we are more than happy to answer any questions that any of the council has. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Nevin, our Director of Finance.
Thank you, City Manager Maltby. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes. Well, not yet.
We can see it now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So good evening. Excuse me, now you can see my title slide. Is that correct? Okay. Good evening, Dr. Mayor, Honorable Vice Mayor, and City Council members. Tonight, I'm going to present a general fund 10-year forecast update. As the title indicates, I'm going to focus tonight solely on the general fund. When staff returns to you this spring and early summer to consider the fiscal year 2023 budget, we will be presenting all funds at that time. But tonight, we will look specifically at the largest fund in the city, the general fund. The purpose of the presentation this evening is to update the City Council on the 10-year forecast that we last reviewed in February 2021. With regard to the agenda for this evening, we will be focusing on a review of changes to budget assumptions, revenues, and expenditures, providing an update on the 10-year financial forecast, and lastly, we will look at potential strategies for budget deficits. Briefly, budget deficits occur in one fiscal year when expenditures exceed revenues for that fiscal year only. Budget deficits are covered by built-up reserves. Tonight, staff will only be presenting potential strategies for budget deficits. Staff will bring these strategies back in more detail at future City Council meetings. As we review changes to budget assumptions, revenues, and expenditures, we will be comparing the adopted budgets from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2022. We will be focusing on items that have not historically been budgeted nor forecasted, and showing how these items are now being budgeted and forecasted. The reason staff is proposing to make these changes to assumptions is the result of staff consultations with the city's auditors, and these changes represent best practices. In addition, we will also look closely at recent general fund revenue reductions and expenditure increases during the same 2 fiscal year timeframe. As we review changes to budget assumptions, a common theme will become apparent. A large amount of actual general fund expenditures have not historically been budgeted, and adding these expenditures to the budget and to the forecast adds to anticipated general fund expenditures. However, these expenditures are actual general fund expenditures, and not budgeting for them or not forecasting them artificially and incorrectly lowers expected general fund expenditures. In previous fiscal years, the items that are about to be discussed have not been budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year, but they have been expended by the end of the fiscal year. The city's auditors have correctly inquired as to why these general fund expenditures have not historically been budgeted, since they represent actual general fund expenditures. I will provide more detail regarding these expenditures as I discuss each individual change to budget assumptions. The first change to budget assumptions is to now budget for all frozen positions and add that cost to the budget. All frozen positions have not historically been budgeted. The reason for this assumption change is to have the authority to freeze positions when necessary and to have the flexibility with departmental staffing. The city will also realize budget savings while these positions remain frozen. Another reason to budget frozen positions is due to the recruitment process. If frozen positions are not budgeted, there is less flexibility during an 18-month period with respect to the appropriate level of staffing within departments. The 18-month period that I'm referring to consists of staff creating the budget 6 months prior to adoption, plus the actual 12 months of the fiscal year. By budgeting for these frozen positions up front, it gives the city manager's office and the finance department the ability to allow for the appropriate level of staffing in consultation with departments and saving months in the recruitment process. The next 4 items on this slide, as you can see from the asterisks, are changes to budget assumptions resulting from conversations with the city's auditors and represent best practices. The first such item that has been added to the budget up front are ongoing general fund subsidies for various city operations. The general fund subsidizes most departmental activities, and certain subsidies have not historically been budgeted. For example, we have added into the budget general fund subsidies for the maintenance of streets, signals, and street lighting, totaling approximately $1.75 million for this fiscal year. This item was just approved at the last City Council meeting as a mid-year budget adjustment. Another general fund subsidy that has been added to the budget is for the Senior Center Fund, and this subsidy is roughly $650,000. Another subsidy added to the budget is for the Engineering Division, roughly $1 million in subsidy. The total for all three of these subsidies is $3.4 million, and we'll see this number later. The second item representing a change to our budget assumptions as a result of consultations with the city's auditors is adding to the budget extra contributions in addition to the city's regular other post-employment benefit or OPEB contributions, representing deposits made into a trust account that may be used in the future to fund the city's OPEB obligations and unfunded liability. The city has been making $2 million contributions annually to our OPEB trust account, where our current balance in that account is about $20.2 million, representing roughly 1/4 of the city's OPEB liability. The annual $2 million contribution to the OPEB trust account has not historically been budgeted, nor has it been forecasted, and the change in budget assumptions is to budget and forecast these contributions going forward. The third item representing a change to our budget assumptions as a result of consultations with the city's auditors is adding to the budget extra contributions in addition to the city's regular pension contributions, representing deposits made into a trust account that may be used in the future to fund the city's pension obligations and unfunded liability. The city has a current balance in a pension trust account of just over $3.6 million. Pension is currently funded at approximately 70%, as was seen in last month's presentation from GovInvest senior consultant Ira Summer. Annual additional contributions have not historically been budgeted, nor have they been forecasted, and the change in budget assumptions is to budget and forecast these contributions going forward. Lastly, the general fund capital improvement program, or CIP, contributions have also not historically been budgeted. Staff and city auditors recommend that we budget for these annual contributions. This fiscal year, the general fund plans to contribute roughly $4.2 million to the capital improvement program. Staff recommends having an annual $1 to $4 million general fund CIP contribution budgeted moving forward. After the Great Recession, there were major cuts to the general fund contribution to the city's capital improvement program, and in certain fiscal years, the general fund contribution was zero. As we have discussed previously, this increases the future need for capital funding and also makes deferred projects more costly in the future. Now we will review a few charts that show the changes to revenue just discussed. Sorry, I skipped a slide. In addition to budget assumption changes, the general fund has experienced significant changes to revenues in the last 2 fiscal years. The largest change to revenues is the addition of Measure Q sales tax revenue. The Measure Q sales tax went into effect in Daly City on April 1st, 2021. 1/4 of revenue was received in fiscal year 2021, totaling $1.7 million. Measure Q revenue is expected to be $7.5 million this fiscal year, and we will see this additional revenue visually a few slides from now. The next 4 items on this slide represent decreases to general fund revenues. General sales tax revenue is the second largest revenue source for the city, following property tax revenue. When I refer to general sales tax revenue, I'm referring to sales tax revenue excluding Measure Q, or sales tax revenue that the city has historically received. General sales tax revenue decreased significantly due to the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting recession. General sales tax revenue peaked in fiscal year 2019, and we have not yet returned to that peak revenue level. We will take a closer look at general sales tax revenue in the next few slides as well. Property taxes, the city's largest source of revenue, also declined since fiscal year 2020. However, this was not due to the pandemic. This decline was due to the previously discussed vehicle license fee or VLF shortfall. As a quick recap, the state of California decreased vehicle license fees years ago for all California vehicle owners. Knowing that this was a large source of revenue for cities and counties in California, the state promised to make us whole and give us the difference between what they currently collect in vehicle license fees and what they used to collect. The source of revenue the state uses to make California jurisdictions whole is property tax revenue. And that is why the VLF shortfall affects Daly City's property tax revenue. For fiscal year 2021, this shortfall was $5.2 million for Daly City. For fiscal year 2022, the current fiscal year, our anticipated shortfall is $3.1 million. We will look at the effect of these VLF shortfalls in the next few slides as well. Other revenues that have decreased as a result of the pandemic are transient occupancy tax or TOT revenue from hotels and motels, program fee revenue due to some city programs being canceled due to COVID, and parking revenue. Parking revenue decreased as people were not shopping or dining as much in person. Lastly, for this slide, another change to revenue relates to the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. Originally, the city planned to replace $20 million in general fund revenue losses due to the pandemic with ARPA funding. This $20 million revenue replacement figure was lowered due to the addition of Measure Q revenue, masking the larger decline in general sales tax and counting against our revenue loss. Therefore, instead of replacing $10 million in fiscal year 2021 and $10 million in fiscal year 2022, as originally planned, we now plan to replace $5 million in fiscal year 2022 and $5 million in fiscal year 2023, for a total of $10 million. This change was incorporated into the ARPA funding plan approved by this council last November. Now we will review a few charts that show the changes to revenue just discussed. This chart shows general sales tax revenue. Again, I'm referring to sales tax revenue excluding Measure Q. This chart shows how general sales tax revenue increased from fiscal year 2017 to 2018, and again to 2019. From fiscal year 2019 to 2020, general sales tax revenue declined 14%, from $15.4 million to $13.3 million. General sales tax revenue picked up slightly in fiscal year 2021 to close to $13.9 million. And we estimate that general sales tax revenue will increase this fiscal year, 2022, to approximately $14.2 million. But as you can see from this dotted line, even by the end of this fiscal year, we still have not returned to pre-pandemic levels. This chart is the biggest reason why staff is recommending continuing with one-year budgets until we have fully recovered from the COVID recession. Before we leave this chart, remember these 6 blue bars. We will see these same 6 blue bars in the next slide. This chart again shows general sales tax revenue. The blue bars represent the actual revenue we have seen since fiscal year 2017 through our current estimate for fiscal year 2022. The orange bars represent pre-COVID estimates for fiscal years 2020, 2021, and 2022. With moderate 3% increases from fiscal year 2019, the orange bars show where general sales tax revenue could have reached. The orange estimate for fiscal year 2022 is $16.9 million versus the blue current estimate of $14.2 million. The difference is roughly $2.7 million. Now, before we leave this chart, keep in mind these orange bars from fiscal years 2020 through fiscal year 2022, as we will see these pre-COVID estimate bars again on the next slide. This chart brings Measure Q into the picture. The chart shows the same orange bars from the previous slide that represent the pre-COVID general sales tax estimates. Again, the pre-COVID estimate for fiscal year 2022 is $16.9 million, shown here in orange. And the current estimate for fiscal year 2022 is here in blue at $14.2 million. Adding the $7.5 million gray bar estimate for Measure Q revenue, this is what fiscal year 2022 looks like with general sales tax revenue plus Measure Q sales tax revenue, or what is referred to as combined sales tax in the title of this slide. The combined sales tax totals $21.7 million, $4.8 million higher than the orange pre-COVID estimate. Measure Q helps to maintain city services, but as you can see in this bubble, text bubble here, $4.9 million of Measure Q revenue has already been allocated to Measure Q programs for fiscal year 2022, and this number will increase each fiscal year as most of the $4.9 million is directly tied to full-time staff costs. This next slide continues with changes to revenue, but we switch to property tax revenue. As we have previously discussed, property tax revenue is the largest source of revenue for the city. This chart shows property tax revenue since fiscal year 2009. As you can see in the chart, from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021, there was an 8% decline in property tax revenue from $37.5 million to $34.4 million, a difference of $3.1 million. This decline in property tax revenue is the first decline since fiscal year 2009 to 2010 during the Great Recession. While this previous decline was due to a housing market correction, the recent property tax decline is due to the vehicle license fee, or VLF, shortfall. The VLF shortfall for fiscal year 2021 was $5.2 million, causing the 8% decline. The VLF shortfall for this fiscal year 2022, is expected to be $3.1 million. Without this shortfall, we would have crossed the $40 million mark on this chart, as the current estimate for this fiscal year is almost $38 million. And adding the $3.1 million shortfall to that estimate would have put us closer to $41 million. Lastly, with regard to this slide and the previous sales tax slides, the last two fiscal years mirror the Great Recession, as this is the first time since then that we have seen a simultaneous decline in our two top revenue sources, property taxes and sales taxes. In addition to changes to revenues, the general fund has also experienced changes to expenditures in the last two fiscal years. The first change in expenditures is an increase in employee costs. There have been 18 positions added to the budget in the last two fiscal years, mostly for Measure Q programming. This has resulted in the addition of $5 million in employee costs for this fiscal year. Another change to employee costs is the addition to the budget of frozen positions, as previously discussed. Lastly, related to employee costs, salary and benefit increases from the last 3-year contracts with bargaining units have added another $5 million to the general fund expenditures in each of the last two fiscal years. And these cost increases will remain in the general fund and increase over the years. The second change in expenditures has been previously discussed, and this change is to add general fund subsidy costs to the budget and to the forecast. These subsidies that have not historically been budgeted nor forecasted total $3.4 million and include subsidies for engineering, the senior center fund, streets, signals, and street lighting. The last change in expenditures has also been previously discussed, and this is related to additional contributions made into an OPEB trust account for future liabilities. The city has been making these annual contributions each fiscal year, and staff recommends that we continue to do so and to include them in the budget and forecast. In order to see how these changes to expenditures affect the budget, this chart shows a summary of new expenditures included in the budget since fiscal year 2020. When staff brought to you the fiscal year 2022 budget last May, the expenditure budget was created in a way depicted by this chart. If we start at the bottom, we begin with a baseline budget, a budget with expenditures from fiscal years 2020 and the rollover budget of 2021, including normal increases. On top of that baseline, staff added the following new expenditures: new Measure Q programs, including the reinstatement of Fire Engine 95, police body-worn cameras and clinician program, adding library staff in order to reinstate library hours, and additional recreation and senior program. Measure Q programming totals $4.9 million in the fiscal year 2022 budget. Next, continuing up the chart, are the $3.4 million in general fund subsidies. Next are positions that were unfrozen in the last 2 years in fire, police, and finance. These positions represent $2.4 million in the fiscal year 2022 budget. Lastly, at the top of the chart are the currently frozen positions in police and public works and represent $1.8 million in the fiscal year 2022 budget. In summary, this is how staff built the budget for fiscal year 2022, with expenditures totaling just over $120 million. As we will shortly look at the updated 10-year forecast, incorporating the changes to budget assumptions, revenues, and expenditures, I would like to discuss future uncertainties related to the forecast. The updated forecast that we are about to review is a snapshot of this moment in time and has the ability to change over time. As assumptions and changes to revenue and expenditure forecast change, the forecast itself will change. This type of scenario was discussed last month when GovInvest Senior Consultant Ira Summer presented recent changes to CalPERS assumptions and how those assumption changes affected the city's forecast of pension costs. Similarly, the forecast will change as the assumptions, revenues, and expenditures change over time. The largest revenue change that could impact the 10-year forecast is changes to property tax revenue, especially since property taxes represent the largest revenue source for the city. Any changes to the economic outlook to the housing market will change the outlook for the city's property tax revenue. A better outlook for the housing market will better the forecast, while an actual or expected housing market decline will hurt the city's long-term forecast. Similarly, changes to economic activity like COVID-19 can greatly affect sales tax or TOT expected revenue. A large rebound from the COVID-19 recession can increase sales tax and TOT revenue estimates, while a future economic downturn will have the opposite effect. Adding a hotel or hotel equivalent at the Lunaparocera Boulevard site will also add to future city revenues. As we saw in last month's pension presentation, pension cost estimates for the city have changed in the past year with recent changes to CalPERS assumptions. And the city's pension cost estimates will change over time along with CalPERS assumption changes. The two most significant CalPERS assumption changes are related to one, actual annual returns for CalPERS investments, and two, any CalPERS changes to the discount rate or the expected rate of return for CalPERS investments. These CalPERS assumptions create uncertainties related to the city's long-term financial forecast. Next, changes to VLF allocations can impact and create uncertainties for the city's financial forecast. As discussed, the state of California reimburses cities and counties in California for vehicle license fee revenue by giving these jurisdictions property tax revenue. Not only are these VLF shortfalls paid back by the state typically 2 fiscal years later, but there are also now discussions at the state level whereby these reimbursements may no longer take place. If the state chooses not to fund the VLF shortfalls in the future, this will have a significant negative effect on city revenues, creating another uncertainty with respect to the city's financial forecast. And just this afternoon, we sent letters from the city to the county in support of the city and county efforts to reinstate or have these shortfalls reimbursed in the future. Lastly, on this slide, creating another uncertainty for the city's financial forecast are future decisions related to salary and benefit increases for bargaining units. As mentioned, all contracts with bargaining units end this calendar year, and salary and benefit increases will affect the city's long-term financial forecast. Before we move on to look at the 10-year financial forecast, I would like to show the council actual figures for the last two fiscal years, 2020 and 2021, and look a little more closely at this fiscal year, 2022. Fiscal year 2020 ended with a $7.5 million surplus, with close to $98.3 million in actual revenues and $90.7 million in actual expenditures. Last fiscal year, 2021, ended in a deficit of $7.7 million, the first deficit since fiscal year 2012, with $96 million in actual revenues and $103.8 million in actual expenditures. The next column, budget 2022, represents the budget that was adopted in May 2021 with a budgeted $9.7 million deficit, made up of $110.8 million in budgeted revenues and $120.5 million in budgeted expenditures. We just saw this $120.5 million expenditure figure 2 slides ago when we looked at the building of the fiscal year 2022 budget. After analyzing projected general fund revenues and expenditures in the first 6 months of this fiscal year and adding in mid-year budget adjustments approved at the last council meeting, staff is estimating that fiscal year 2022 will close with a smaller deficit, approximately $7.3 million. This estimated deficit is more than $2 million smaller than the deficit budgeted last May, and staff is looking to further improve and lower this expected deficit. This may be accomplished between now and June 30th, 2022 by working with departments to have salary and benefit savings by maintaining current staff vacancies longer and limiting year-end operating budget expenditures to only those that are absolutely necessary. One last thing to note on this slide was mentioned earlier, and that is the change to revenue loss replacement from ARPA funds. Staff originally expected to utilize $10 million of revenue loss replacement in fiscal year 2021, which would have erased last year's deficit and led to a surplus of close to $2.3 million. The original plan also involved utilizing $10 million of ARPA funds in fiscal year 2022. The current plan for ARPA funds, as approved last November, is to use $5 million in fiscal year 2022, this fiscal year, and $5 million next fiscal year 2023. The figures on this side represent those changes. Now we will look at an updated 10-year financial forecast incorporating all the budget assumption changes, as well as the changes to revenues and expenditures that we just discussed. This forecast also assumes that no intervention or potential strategies to deal with projected budget deficits have been enacted. In other words, this 10-year forecast incorporates the status quo. With no intervention, this is what the current 10-year forecast looks like. Similar to how the forecast has been previously presented, the chart on the left shows the annual surplus blue or deficit red and its magnitude. The chart on the right shows similar information, but shows the trend for reserves and the reserve targets. As we just saw a few slides ago, fiscal year 2019-20 ended with a $7.53 million surplus and a reserve balance of $53.3 million. Fiscal year 2020-21 ended with the first actual general fund deficit in a decade, and that deficit was $7.72 million. The reserve balance correspondingly decreased by that deficit amount to $45.62 million, basically paying for the deficit last fiscal year. The projected deficits in the coming 2 fiscal years are $7.32 million and $6.3 million, growing to $12.74 million in fiscal year 23-24. Since that fiscal year coincides with the city's final payment of our 20-year pension obligation bonds, the future deficits become smaller and represent an $8 to $10 million annual structural deficit. With annual deficits, as can be seen on the graph on the right, the reserves are depleted over the next 5 fiscal years. These two graphs take the changes to budget assumptions and the changes to revenues and expenditures in the last 2 fiscal years and project them out into the future. Budgeting and forecasting these changes are shown here on this slide. As previously stated, these changes represent best practices for budgeting and forecasting and are in line with recommendations of the city's auditors. Staff has no intention of these projected deficits becoming actual deficits of this magnitude. Before we conclude this presentation, staff would like to review potential strategies we can take together for budget deficits, and we plan on revisiting several of these strategies with you in the near future. Due to its importance, the forecast will become a common theme for us collectively. Another way to look at the forecast is to look at the revenue and expenditure trend lines. The blue line represents general fund revenues, while the orange line represents general fund expenditures. Starting at the far left of this chart, revenue exceeded expenditures in fiscal year 2019-2020, resulting in a budget surplus, the surplus we saw on a previous slide. For fiscal year 2020-2021, the lines crossed and expenditures exceeded revenues. We ended the year in a deficit, again, the first deficit in a decade. Forecasting these lines out into the future, the orange expenditure line remains above the blue revenue line, resulting in forecasted deficits. The largest projected deficit is in fiscal year 2023-24, where the gap between the orange line and the blue line is the widest. This fiscal year also coincides with the city's final payment of our 20-year pension obligation bonds, and the gap between the expenditure line and the revenue line becomes smaller, resulting in smaller projected future deficits. In these out years, our collective goal will be to minimize the actual gap between these two lines and eventually, hopefully, have them cross each other again so that actual revenues exceed actual expenditures. Now we will discuss potential strategies to deal with the projected budget deficits. These are strategies that Daly City and our neighbors have used to deal with economic downturns in the past, and they are strategies we will return to in the near future. This slide highlights some of the potential strategies to consider to deal with potential deficits. The first strategy is to adopt a one-year budget. I've mentioned previously that finance staff is going to continue to closely monitor general fund revenues, and when staff sees that we have recovered enough from the COVID pandemic and its recessionary impacts, staff will recommend returning to the 2-year budget cycle. Staff is not comfortable at this time recommending a return to the 2-year budget cycle. The one figure that staff is monitoring the closest is general sales tax revenue. As we saw earlier, the city's general sales tax revenue, excluding Measure Q, has not yet returned to our pre-COVID peak achieved in fiscal year 2019. As we are now almost 3 years removed from the end of that fiscal year, we have still not returned to that level of revenue. A 1-year budget cycle is recommended until the city has fully come out of the COVID recession. The second potential strategy to deal with budget deficits is to increase revenues. As I will mention momentarily, staff is planning on bringing to this council a consideration of increasing user fees to more closely align with cost recovery. The largest action that could happen with regard to revenue increases already happened with the passage of Measure Q by voters of Daly City in November of 2020. Other revenue increases will be seen through new businesses coming into the city or the potential for a hotel or equivalent on Untitled Boulevard. The next potential strategy is to evaluate salary and benefit increases to determine what is affordable for the city in the short and long term. Each percentage increase in employee COLAs represents a significant ongoing increase to general fund expenditures. We will be discussing these figures with you, the City Council, and the bargaining units as negotiations move forward. The next potential strategy for dealing with budget deficits is to minimize increases to operating expenditures. Operating expenditures are those expenditures unrelated to salaries and benefits. The approach to minimize these expenditures was used as recently as the beginning of the pandemic. As part of emergency measures, the 2-year budget for fiscal years 2021 and 2022 was not pursued, and a rollover budget from fiscal year 2020 to 2021 was adopted. One of the main reasons to roll over this budget was to minimize increases to operating expenditures. Last year, staff recommended another one-year budget for fiscal year 2022, and this spring and summer, staff will again recommend a one-year budget. Budget figures have been requested from each department, and the goal for operating expenditures was to minimize increases as much as possible for expenditures that are not tied to annual automatic increases like consulting contracts. Another potential strategy for budget deficits is to freeze vacant positions. The finance department and the city manager's office have talked with departments about freezing vacant positions, and these conversations will continue. While it is difficult operationally to freeze vacant positions, it does save a good deal of money to do so. The next potential strategy is to have no new programs or FTE added to the budget. This strategy can also save money in the long run. The next potential strategy is to reduce general fund capital improvement program contributions. While this strategy can help in the short term, we have seen the negative effects of these reductions in the long term. Another strategy is to utilize remaining funds in Fund 33 in the short term to help fund general fund CIP contributions. This fund was created a long time ago, and money was set aside for large-scale building projects. With no building projects on the horizon, the strategy has been to utilize these funds in the short term and not sit on them unused. The next potential strategy for budget deficits is to reduce extra contributions made to pension or OPEB trust accounts. This strategy can also save money in the general fund in the short term, but it will only make it harder to pay our pension and OPEB liabilities in the future. The last strategy is last for a reason. While reducing the city's workforce and programming could potentially have a significant amount, could save a significant amount from the budget long term, it is the hardest strategy to implement. This strategy may be used when employees retire and the decision is made not to fill their position in the short or long term. The strategy was used in Daly City during the Great Recession, and it had the effect of lowering morale in the workforce as it created more work for those employees remaining with the city. While decisions like this may need to be considered in the future, it is the final strategy on this slide for a reason. And before wrapping up, we will discuss next steps that impact our financial forecast. Regarding immediate next steps, staff is planning on the following: bringing to the City Council for your review and adoption sometime this spring, proposed increases to user fees. Staff is currently working with our consultant and will make recommendations regarding increases to user fees that more closely align with cost recovery. Also, in the spring and early summer, staff will present a one-year budget for fiscal year 2023 for your consideration and adoption. Additionally, negotiations with bargaining units are moving forward as the most recent contracts expire this calendar year. Lastly, staff is having discussions with industry consultants and plans to bring to this council potential strategies for addressing long-term pension and OPEB obligations. This will be a follow-up to the January 24th pension presentation from GovInvest Senior Consultant, Iris Summer. Thank you very much. This concludes my presentation, and staff is available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Nevin. I would like to open up to my colleagues. Councilmember Glenn Sylvester.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Nevin, for your report. I guess this is as close as to a crystal ball that we can get to, and that's basically providing the facts as to the current conditions. I have a few questions, and for the sake of time, if you can take down these questions. I don't need an answer now. However, as we move forward, I would appreciate obtaining some additional information. I'll first start off, you had made mention about street lighting and CIP. I understand Daly City has been going through quite a bit with street light outages, and we have become dependent upon PG&E. I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism in the future through CIP to replace those lights to burn more efficiently and less dependence on PG&E. That's number one. I fail to see the correlation between property tax and VLF, vehicle license fees. Folks are still driving, they still have to register their vehicles, but I can't see how that affects property tax. I would appreciate it if you can separate those buckets out different from each other. We have a shortfall in VLF, but on the property tax side, we may have a shortfall, but based upon the financial conditions right now, when interest rates are low, home prices go up, and subsequently we have sales. The Feds is about to raise the interest rates, which would slow down the increase in home values. So that's yet to be seen. So if we can break out property tax revenue, separate that from VLF, that would be good. Let's see, interest rates. You had made 5 categories: property tax, sales tax or TOT revenue, pension costs, changes in VLF allocations, and salaries and benefits. I want to concentrate more on sales tax, which was the second category. We were talking about TOT revenue. It's no doubt that we need more hotels in Daly City, but council has not made a decision for Junaparocera yet. You had made mention twice about a hotel on JS, but council has not made a decision. And I wanted to bring up the fact that, for instance, life sciences, which is a potential candidate, has offered to pay or include TOT. So not necessarily a hotel will go there on JS. Working down on the strategies, I made a note here. Approximately 3 years ago, I had asked the city to engage in fees and cost recovery to see where our city stands in comparison to other cities in the area of cost recovery. I am so happy that finally this is coming to fruition, and I think we will all be surprised as to how Daly City is faring in that regard. Let's see, increase of revenue, hotel, operating expenditures. And at the beginning, I forgot one point. We talked about frozen budgets. I would hope to have a breakdown on the type of frozen positions that we will have, and that we are not budgeting on the high end, but basically being more relevant to what our city needs. Say, for instance, you don't want a 5th step staff person, FTE, where a first step or entry level may be sufficient. So I don't want to see those frozen positions exaggerated, or a lot of work needs to be done, and to come up with just what we need for Daly City. So I will be questioning it if I see an elevated position as a frozen item in the budget later on. So those are all the questions that I have at this time, and I thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Sylvester, for your questions. And we will be returning to your questions in the future. Just to briefly discuss your questions, the street lighting and CIP and the PG&E dependence, that issue I have discussed with Director Chu, and that will continue. It is extremely costly to change technologies and to go with the newer technologies, but that is something that the city should look at and make significant analyses related to that.
Thank you.
I will, in future presentations, try to take that VLF shortfall out and show property tax by itself. The reason that it's commingled is because that's how the state reimburses the city for the shortfall. And I just want to make that comment again, but we'll try our best to separate those buckets. And property tax, sales tax revenue and TOT revenue. I mentioned hotel on JS or a hotel equivalent, but that's a good point. We don't incorporate any anticipated revenues into the forecast until those revenues are projected and look to be coming in. If we move forward with something and breaks ground and we know it's going to be 2 years since then, we will put 2 years down the line, we will put that revenue in the forecast so we can see what that looks like. But I appreciate your comment. And strategies and fees and cost recovery, again, I'm very excited about the work we've done already and the work that we're going to do before we bring that to your council for consideration. And I believe that if we can get as close to cost recovery as we can, that will be a very good thing for the city. And also I will look to create a breakdown for you for the fiscal year 2023 budget with respect to frozen positions and what those look like.
Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, thank you, Mr. Nevin, for the great presentation. You gave a lot of great breakdown. I just actually have a few. I remember you were saying, if you wouldn't mind, I hate to ask you to repeat, that it was anticipated from, we were going to get 10 million from the recovery. Is that correct? The American recovery, but we really are only going to get 5 million because we have Measure Q could not be considered. Would you mind explaining that a little bit?
Sure.
Clarify that.
Yes.
That's a big significant chunk that we couldn't count on. Go ahead. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sure. The originally when we identified and were told of how much the city was receiving, we did some preliminary calculations for revenue loss since COVID. As the program came further along, the restrictions changed to how you can calculate what that revenue loss would be. Some cities were arguing that why should they be penalized because they have a new sales tax measure or a new revenue source come into the picture post-COVID. And the rules were that you have to incorporate that revenue. And the way it calculates out is that we cannot replace as much directly as revenue loss replacement. It was $10 million in 2 fiscal years. So it was originally $20 million that we were looking for as a revenue loss replacement, fiscal year 21 and 22. We now, with our new plan, are doing $5 million per year for a total of $10 million in fiscal years 22 and 23.
Okay. Also with that, would you mind, I think on the part, well, so that's our Measure Q. And given the fact that we had already really allocated for the Measure Q, bringing back Engine 95, so that was taken care of, and that a lot of the manpower, maybe a couple more might be needed. And then we did get the cameras for our police department. Going forward, since that was already purchased, that will help us in the future. Is that correct? That amount of money, since that was already allocated, then going forward, obviously we don't have to allocate that again. And that will give us maybe a little bit better standing on, of course, we're going to future expenses, but that in itself was a significant piece that we anticipated, of course, and that we needed. And then that will go from that. Maybe Shauna wanted to. Shauna, did you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, if you don't mind me picking.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and you are right about that, Councilmember DiGiovanni. And I just want to make the point that I think it was pretty clear in Tim's presentation, but Measure Q really helped us throughout really this complex situation that's created a very different financial outlook for us. And staff would not have recommended those replenishing of staff, whether it was Engine 95 or, expanding library hours or adding programs to senior, our older adult population, we would not have recommended that had we not passed Measure Q. We would not have been able to afford that.
Exactly, and that was the purpose of Measure Q. So we fulfilled our obligation. Well, my point was that, it's great because we want to hopefully be able to do that again, not but maybe expand more in that area, but it's great. We got a lot accomplished, and I think for our community and fulfill that area. And then the other point was for clarification, I know that we'll be able to ask questions in the future. I think it's great. Recovery fees, is that, so exactly in a nutshell, what exactly happened was we didn't anticipate from the last presentation up until now, like you said, like we didn't know, they changed the rules on ARPA. So that was less money. And of course, expenditures, as you said, based on, I think the breakdown was, if you don't mind repeating, engineering and what else, Mr. Nevin, I apologize.
No problem. The engineering subsidy was, you're talking about actual figures of roughly $1 million.
Okay.
Senior fund, we generally subsidize that when we first came into the general fund at about $650,000 at that point. And then there was the additional streets maintenance and signals and street lights. That was an additional $1.7 million that we added to the budget at the mid-year. So moving forward, what we'd like to do is budget those figures up front. And then as we move along the fiscal year, when we know certain things are going to change, we'll try to correct at mid-year what those subsidies will actually be.
Yeah, so that is great. I'd say it's great that you broke that down, because I kept saying what expenditures or what have you, but it makes it very clear on that. And then there's 14,000 circuits, as we know. And then for my council member, it's an estimated, it's over $20 million to fix the ROs. So that is a solution that we're gonna have to look for. I don't know what, but it's approximately 20 million. So that's a totally different ball game, all in a wax. But at the, one more question, I think that we could ask, obviously, at the next council member. So we also need to support and ask our state legislators, as you did. Thank you for sending the letter. And I also, I'm sure my colleagues support that they continue to reimburse us for that the VLF. I think that vehicle license fee. So they need to continue that money, and they have a surplus at the state. So I think that the cities need to, all our cities, but especially Daly City, of course, we're concerned about to do that, because we cannot go backwards. We need to go forward. And I totally agree on your options. The last option is not an option. And I totally agree on that on the last one. I know you had to post it up there, but I think that, we have other, like you said, strategies that we can look into as we move forward. I look forward to the pension gentleman who gave that trust issue. I believe that was something new. So I appreciate the time. And then, so we now know a bigger picture, and then we're going to go forward and get the fees. And thank you to the council member Sylvester for that as well. And we can go take it from there. And it's not as much doom and gloom as we think it is, but we do need to, like you said, take action and work on this, I think. So thank you, Mr. Nevin, city manager, and everyone else in finance that worked on this. And totally appreciate it. And that we can all work on this together. And I think our staff, because we definitely don't want to put any more on the backs of the people that work here. I don't think that any of us really feel that, because you've done enough, especially during COVID. It's been tough, and we really haven't got up to our level yet. And unfrozen positions, we can look for that, or the frozen ones. But we all know we only have 50 officers out on the street. We only have 50. So we know that we have to make sure that public safety and the safety in our community, we need our firefighters, we need our parks, like everybody's worked very, very hard. And that's really need to take care of our city and the services. So thank you so much. And thank you to the city manager as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look forward to working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, for your questions and comments.
Vice Mayor Ray Bonaventura.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we put the graph down so I could see who I'm sort of talking to.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. So I wanted to say that, if this was a restaurant, I would say my compliments to the chef, because I thought the presentation was very well done. I thought it was also very thoughtful. And in fact, the way you purposely said at the end that you had put the category of reducing the workforce at the end, it shows me that the city, the staff really knows the council well, and what we are been struggling with and we're all concerned about. And so I very much appreciate how the workforce is being carefully considered, not to be harmed, not to be touched, at least until as a last resort, because after all, we're not a city without the workforce that we have. And again, they do a tremendous job as it already is. So thank you for the presentation. It was very well done. I understood it. It was the right categories, and it was a clear explanation as to each individual category. I will say that I am not as, I'm not as excited about recovering user fees, and not that I'm not a fan of recovering, the costs, but I do believe that we, as a city, have an obligation to provide for services, even though at sometimes we need to subsidize. And so I would encourage that we continue to look at ways to fund, for example, libraries, without having the need, because when I see user fees, I see as like sticking it to the consumer, and I don't want to be a part of that. I do want to be a part of trying to make our community know that we still very much care about things like libraries, and that we will do what we can to maintain the services, and that the consumer, our community, realizes that. And I don't want to make it to where, because some people can't afford some of the costs, even though minimal. So I would like you to continue to look for grants, programs, any other opportunities to subsidize, so that even if we're not equally balanced in terms of cost recovery, we can still go forward in providing services. But other than that, well done, and looking forward to the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor Buenaventura. And if I may, regarding user fees, it has been almost a decade since fees have been looked at and increased, number one. And I doubt that the staff recommendation will come back as 100% cost recovery in most categories. It'll be fees that will reflect where the fees should be. And also looking at, as Council Member Sylvester talked about, where we are in relation to other cities, and so that we can test that and see where we are. But I'd also like to thank you as well for a question that you asked at a prior meeting and presentation that I had, which was regarding reserves and whether we had reserves that were too high of a level. And it made me thinking about what are where reserves should be, what are appropriate levels of reserves. So it made me think about in my department, what we're going to be tasked with is doing a study looking at the Great Recession, looking at the COVID recession, and seeing what would have been needed in terms of reserve levels pre-Great Recession, pre-COVID. So that's something that I look forward to looking into and seeing what are appropriate levels. When we have good economic years, we should be putting some money away so that we have reserves that can meet the economic downturns that we experience every so often. But thank you for that question last time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nevin. You, again, have showed that you are working really hard and that the city is in good hands. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I have one quick question, Mr. Nevin. I was wondering, one thing that I didn't see in any of the charts was the potential of cannabis taxes. And I just wanted to know where are we at in terms of rolling it out and actually the full implementation for cannabis.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor, for that question. Actually, it almost did make my comments, and I did, and that was an oversight of mine, but it goes in line with the answer to potential hotel or hotel equivalent revenue and that sort of thing, where this is something that is upcoming, but we have actually incorporated into the forecast, although you can't see it in the big numbers, but we have incorporated into the forecast the small amounts that we know we will be receiving from cannabis businesses. We have 4 cannabis businesses that have received a license from the city. They're in the process of making tenant improvements at their locations. And so those, when we know that they're going to open, after we've seen what they have made in revenue in their first 6 months, their first 12 months, those figures of what we will receive in tax dollars will be incorporated into the forecast. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Nevin. Thank you so much, City Manager Maltby. I appreciate the presentation, straightforward, clean, and transparent. So thank you for that. Okay, so moving on in our agenda, the approval minutes for regular meeting of February 14, 2022. Can I get a motion to Councilmember Glenn Sylvester?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to request an amendment to the minutes. I'll wait for your go ahead before we take the vote.
Go right ahead.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to thank the city clerk. I know it's very, very difficult to record everything or get everything written down. And normally in the council reports, generally that's not indicated in the minutes, only that a report had been made. But in this specific case, during my report on the Cal City's public safety, I had specifically requested that the city moves forward in establishing an ad hoc committee to consist of the police department, business development, and later on to include retail stores and folks from the community in dealing with smash and grab and catalytic converter thefts. As I made mention, the governor has appropriated $285 million throughout the next 5 years to address those issues. And I think Daly City, the steps that we take in the beginning may assist us in getting some of those funds to include asset forfeiture resources. So I think we need to get the ball rolling, find out all the resources that are out there, such as FedEx and UPS for parcel theft. I think this would be a great committee. So if we can add that to the minutes, I would gladly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Glenn Sylvester. Are there any other edits to the minutes of February 14, 2022? All
Not
right.
hearing any additional edits, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a
Okay.
motion that we approve the previous minutes with the aforementioned changes requested. Thank you.
Second.
You have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that would like to be pulled by my colleagues?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right. There's a first. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Moving along here. Okay. Communications. Item number 13, consideration of proposals for the hotel parcel at 1837 Lunaparocera Boulevard. And this will be passed to Ms. Tatum Mothershead.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. It's very exciting to be here this evening. On February 15th, the City Council received presentations from and interviewed 4 developer teams that were interested in developing the city's hotel parcel at 1837 Lunaparocera Boulevard. At that meeting, the City Council only received the information and did not have any time to deliberate on the developer's qualifications, the project proposals, or the developer's fit within the community. So at tonight's meeting, the City Council has that opportunity to discuss the proposals that were submitted. There's a brief summary in your staff report of the proposals that you saw presentations on, just as the refresh that you can discuss. The next steps, staff is recommending that the City Council select 1 or up to 4 developer teams that they would like to have progress to a second round, and direct staff to work with those developers to submit a term sheet that further details their proposal for the development of the site. Some of the items, we have a list of items in your staff report, but some of them include more specific information regarding the purchase price, the due diligence period, closing contingencies, some of the qualitative and quantitative economic and community benefits that the project would generate. Based on the information that we get in the term sheet, we will bring that to the City Council and provide an additional opportunity for the City Council to review that and interact with the development teams. Once the preferred developer is selected, then the council can pursue negotiations with the chosen developer and then ultimately enter into an inclusive negotiating agreement. I am available to answer any questions. We also have Ken Hira from Cosmont, who's been helping us with this process and who would also participate in this second round of follow-up. So I now leave it to the council to discuss the proposals and provide direction to staff. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Ray Buenaventura.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first, I want to thank everybody for organizing the special presentation. I thought it was very well done. It was a good way to see all the projects and listen to the presenters make their case. So for me, I think just to get the ball rolling, I am favoring 2 of the applicants, and I'm outright not interested in the other remaining 2. So the 2 I'm in favor of. 1, I'm actually going to say is surprising to me, and that is the presentation by the life science, the non-hotel related presentation. I think to me that was an example of how we need to be open-minded, and because I tell you, I went in there thinking that this was a hotel site that we had all had the intention of doing, but the real motivating factor was, I think, to gain revenue for the city. So the presentation that they made, it intrigued me. I'm not saying it put me over the top. In fact, it didn't. But I just think it's something that we should talk about and we should consider. If I were to rank the number 1 choice, it would be the Bob McLennan project. I thought that presentation was very well done. I thought they hit all the points that we cared about. And I thought that Mr. McLennan in particular seemed to be very open and honest about his plans, his intentions, his capabilities, and what he saw for that space. You know, when he said things like, you know, they'll walk away with the deposit or whatever, if it wasn't completed. I mean, I thought that was courageous, and that was grit and determination to get this done, something that we have lacked in the past. So I don't think we need to, you know, disparage or be negative about the other two presenters, because I think they all tried really hard too. But I think we should move forward with those two projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Next person or next council member is Councilmember Glenn Sylvester.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm again, I have to concur with Mr. Buenaventura in thanking the staff and all those involved for putting the presentations together for us. Sorry I did not have the time because we were on a tight schedule during the meeting. But at the beginning of the meeting, Ms. Mothershead had indicated that there was a fifth developer and that he had pulled out. And I didn't get the reasons as to why this developer pulled out or whether they were having a hardship problem. But I feel that this is a decision that's going to be a part of Daly City and its community in the years to come. And even when most likely we're gone, or at least I am. And I think it's a very important decision. And I think we owe it to follow up with that last vendor. I believe it was the Lamb Group, and ascertain if they're still willing to present and what it is that they have to offer. Again, I think it's very, very important that we at least consider everyone here at the table. Thank you.
Okay, couldn't find the unmute button. Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just have a quick question for Ms. Mothershead. So when we decided like who we're going to move over or what have you tonight, will we, like you said, will they be able to come back so we can ask the questions that we want to ask off the term sheet? Because I still have a couple questions, even if they're the final 2 or 3.
Yeah, if we look at how we did this process last time, once we got the term sheet, at the time, all the developers were selected in the last process, and that was partly because we only had one developer and we had multiple sites, and so that's why I think all developers were selected in the last round. But the way the process worked is we got the term sheet, and then with that term sheet, we came back to council. And then I believe it was a more open-ended interview process at that time. So it was a more open dialogue. Certainly the council tonight, if they want to provide direction on how they would like to see the next steps go, they are certainly, staff is ready to receive direction on that. So if there's something, that the council would like to include in the process, we can certainly include that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for the clarification. So we actually have a little opportunity now, and then we have another opportunity again, which is great. So I would like to ask if that anything to do with a project labor agreement, if anyone has had any experience or that they would like to entertain, or they would to be a part of our process with a project labor agreement. to put that in there, and I might have questions when we come back after the term sheet, which I appreciate that opportunity as well, Ms. Motherson. And thank you for explaining it, because I wasn't on the council at the time when you guys were doing the hotel. So thank you for repeating the process when I was a member of the public at the time. And then, so that I would like to entertain. And then I would entertain the, that Mr. McClellan's project and the biotech R&D project. While I appreciate everyone's input, great presentations, they put a lot of time into it. And I know that, you know, this is a very, very, as Mr. Councilmember Sylvester alluded to, probably one of the most important, given that we have limited land and limited ways to get our revenue going and putting the right thing in, and timing is everything. So even though the hotel didn't go from before, but now here we are now, and then we have a different way of getting revenue, that might be the angle that we might look for. So for that, I would like to move forward those two. And I know that if anyone's looking for a hotel, I believe that this has nothing to do with this, but it's given opportunities that we did have that at one time, even when I wasn't on the council, an opportunity to look at the, near the Coma BART station. I don't know, Mr. Hara was involved in that as well. That there had been a talk about that with the Samtrans and that, but that's down the road. But anyway, so those are the two that I would like to see move forward, but to thank everyone for their time, their great presentations, loving Daly City enough to be involved in that and concur. And I know that everyone was given a timeline to be fair to the other ones. So I'm not sure what happened to the one that Mr. Sylvester alluded to, but that we have to look at that and be fair to the other people that did turn their everything in time. So thank you very much, and looking for the project labor.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni. I'd like to
Mr.
open it
Mayor.
up.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. I would like to open up to Councilmember Justin Manalo. She just arrived. I just want to give her some space if she has anything that she'd like to add.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for that. You know, I think it's extremely important, like, as we look at this development around, like, what really is the cost benefit analysis in regards to this land. And also just ensuring that we have developers on hand that is able to have the financing behind their idea and you know, what they're proposing. I think that's one aspect that's very important. And I'd like to know also from staff, how would we be able to kind of, given what has transpired in the past, how would we be able to ensure that the next project forthcoming are pursued? Thank you.
I think what I heard the question to be is how staff or would be able to confirm the financial wherewithal of a selected developer. So I'm going to defer to Ken to what sort of questions we could add or items that we could add in the term sheet that would help provide us some level of confidence in that category.
It is one of the more important questions, I think, is, you know, these are very expensive projects. And so if we're talking about something in the $50 to $100 million range in project costs, it will become very important, I think, as part of due diligence to really understand their access to capital. So I think it's some probing questions, frankly. I think it's some evidence, whether it's banking relationships, banking commitments, equity commitments, vis-a-vis written documentation, that is sort of forensic due diligence that will really be the burden on us to vet with the parties that we decide to pursue. So it's asking the hard questions and looking for some real evidence.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Jesselyn Manalo. Vice Mayor Ray Ventura.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ken, I thought that when we had previously discussed scheduling of these interviews, that we had we were going to open up the process again and have a second round of first interviews, one in February and one in March, and understanding that that calendar process has been delayed. But what can you tell us about when was the second round open, and were there any viable projects that were proposed at that time?
Let me try to understand the question. I think the idea was in the beginning there was some interest, but I remember the council meeting where you gave some direction. The council gave direction to make sure that it was open on the website and published so that it was accessible from multiple parties. I think if I'm recalling correctly, that there were subsequent submittals as a result of that. And so some of the folks who were less aware of it even offered different product types, if you will, which is inclusive of some residential and even the life sciences, because the original effort was to call this a hotel site. And then we kind of backed off on that to say it's really an opportunity site. So I think we did get some more diverse responses as evidenced by the parties that we're discussing tonight.
Okay. And then just so that we are we're being fair to everyone, I'm trying to understand what happened with I know that they were originally we were scheduled with 5 presentations, one being with the Lamb property. I'm trying to understand what happened there, because I thought that he had submitted everything he needed to submit,
Right.
and he wasn't allowed to present. I want to understand what happened.
I can try to explain that, and then Tatum, please, if I don't characterize it correctly. But from our review of the material, yes, there was 5 submittals, including, I think we're referring to that as LF George, but forgive me if I'm not referring to it correctly. And that response actually had an identification of some dollars that were in an account that were earmarked for an exchange, a 1031 exchange. If you're familiar with that, it's where there's money that needs to be placed within a certain time frame, and that time frame had expired. And so there was an email that formally rescinded their interest level. And so we took that to mean, so it wasn't that they didn't have an opportunity to interview per se, but there was an actual formal email that said, we're going to withdraw from the process. I don't remember exactly what it said, but that's essentially what happened. And so our interpretation of that was the dollars that were earmarked to execute a 1031 exchange had expired based on the timing of that of his transaction or that party's transaction.
I see. Understood. Tatum, did you have anything else to add?
No, Ken characterized it correctly, but they did have a full submittal when they submitted, and they were invited to attend, but and they withdrew, and so they weren't scheduled.
All right.
But I guess they have subsequently expressed interest.
Okay. But was there, so you're saying that their withdrawal was on paper, and it actually was clear that they were withdrawing?
They withdrew via email when they were sent an invitation and a date and time to come to interview. They said they were no longer interested in the development.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Glenn Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In follow up to LF Properties, I heard the term and used, it was interpreted as, but, and further, looks like they still showed interest. Now, I'm concerned about these developers because a lot of time and money spent to make these renditions and to put together a plan. I do believe in fairness, and we had allotted enough time for all the other developers, but we ran ahead of time. And I think we owe it to ourselves to at least let them finish off the process and see, well, number one, see if they're still interested, which it was said that they are. And number two, then make a decision. We have to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. There are further questions that need to be addressed. And when it comes to the term sheet, each one of these developers has to develop a term sheet. I'm not looking for the best price, but I'm looking for what's best for our community and what's best for Daly City. I think we owe it to the other developer to acknowledge, hey, is this your final intent? And that wasn't done. It was just interpreted as a withdrawal from the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Glenn Sylvester. Are there any other comments by my colleagues? Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to do what, like a consensus of what our council says and see how we can move forward and to the next steps, or if they would like to entertain bringing everyone back or whatever, just a consensus, whatever we would like to do.
Good point, Councilmember DiGiovanni. Vice Mayor Ray Bonaventura.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If it's a, I don't know if the staff needs a motion on this, but if it's a motion that's needed, I would make the motion to bring back and include, so bring back the McLennan properties, the life science project, and include the Lamb property for presentation, for initial presentation. That's my motion.
I'll second that motion.
Before we proceed, I would like to get comments from Councilmember Jocelyn Manala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With what Councilmember or Vice Mayor Ventura mentioned, I think that if there are still interested parties, I think it's important to have, provide that opportunity. And then also in what was recommended on the table, I think I'm also in favor of it. I know there's a second on the floor, but I wanted to voice my agreement in this regard. Thank you.
All right. So we have a first and a second. So there's so the motion is to have J.M. McLennan and Phase 3, and also include the withdrawn party or the interpreted withdrawn party into the next round of interviews, just to get a whole sense of all the applicants that applied. Is that correct?
We also wanted to include life sciences, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, is life science Phase 3? I can't remember. Okay, got you. Director Mothershead.
I just had a question for clarification on process. Are we asking LF George just to jump to the step where they also include a term sheet with their proposal, or do we want to receive a presentation? For example, we could schedule them to present at the next council meeting, just that development group. And then you can decide at that meeting if you'd like them to progress, and then we direct them to submit the term sheet. And then we put them all sort of in time with one another, so that when you do have the second round interviews, they've all sort of caught up. Is that the preference of the council? Or did you want LF George to just jump to the term sheet?
Vice Mayor Ray Ventura.
Well, Tatum, what do you think works better for your staff, and how you would, because you're going to be orchestrating this whole thing, and what makes sense to you?
I would say that in fairness to the other development teams that had to put together presentations and had the interview questions, I would recommend that LF George be invited to present perhaps on the 14th. given that it's just one developer, it should be a fairly short interview. And then perhaps at that meeting, the council can give direction if they'd like them to progress with the other two selected developers to submit the term sheet, and then we would put them all together. But I'm I'm speaking off the cuff, so I don't know if the city manager has other direction as well.
I concur with you, Ms. Mothershead. That makes perfect sense.
I agree as well. So I would amend my motion to include that language.
Okay, so for clarification, we'll ask, I always forget the last developer, is it LF George, to see if they can come back, if they're still interested, and they'll present the next meeting. And if everything's all aligned, then we'll bunch them all the three together, and we'll go on from there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni, go for it.
Just a quick clarification. We would be asking them the same questions that you gave us the last time, right? Ms. Mothershead?
I think that would be
It is better, right? Yeah, to be fair. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion by Vice Mayor Ray Buenaventura with the language that Director Mothershead have gave us and informed us, and a second by Councilmember Glenn Sylvester. Ms. City Clerk, if you can provide us with a roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Mr. Buenaventura,
Aye.
Ms. DiGiovanni,
Aye.
Ms. Manalo,
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester,
Glenn Sylvester, aye.
Dr. Rod.
Aye. Great. Thank you. So motion passes. Thank you to my colleagues for that, and Mr. Hira and Ms. Mothershead for all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm. So next thing on our agenda is award of bids and contracts. Item number 14, accept.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I apologize. It's come to our attention. I think we forgot to do a vote on the consent agenda. If we can just do a formal voice vote, I apologize.
Okay.
No, we
No
For the
problem.
record.
Voice vote. So
I
all
believe
those
there
in
was
favor.
a first and a second.
Oh, but I did that again last time.
No, I believe there
I know.
already was a first and a second, but
Yeah.
we may want to do it just
Okay.
for formality.
For the consent agenda, all those in favor say aye.
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 I
you.
apologize.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Rose, for that. Proceeding to item number 14, accept per capita program grant, appropriate funds, and award contract for the Polaris Park improvement. We have Jeff Fornesi to provide more information. So Jeff, go right ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. As noted, the item before you is a recommendation from staff to accept a per capita program grant funds totaling $244,645, appropriate $130,355 of parkland dedication fees, and $244,645 per capita program grant to fully fund the Polaris Park project. Award a contract to Ross Recreation Equipment and Company in the amount of $243,336.39, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary contracts to complete the Polaris Park improvement project. During the city council meeting on October 25th, 2021, the city council approved resolution number 21141, which authorized staff to apply for a state grant funded through Proposition 68 per capita program to make improvements to Polaris Park. At the meeting, it was noted that the per capita program allocation to City of Daly City is $244,645 and requires a minimum 20% city match. The total estimated cost of the project is $375,000, which includes a 15% contingency. Daly City received notification that the per capita program grant funds have been awarded to the city, and the next step is in this process is to receive approval from City Council to accept the grant funds and to allocate those funds into a budget. The city's contribution of $130,355 in parkland dedication fees, which will meet the required minimum 20% local funding match. The contract with Ross Recreation Equipment is for the new playground equipment, and safety surface installation and taxes, the $243,336.39. The balance of the project funds minus 15% contingency, which is about $56,000, is approximately $75,000. The $75,000 will be used to improve park amenities, accessibility, and landscaping. The purchase and installation of the playground equipment and safety surface is a purchase eligible through the Purchasing Cooperative National Purchasing Partners Government, NPP-gov, whose cooperative purchasing contract has been competitively solicited so that government agencies can utilize their contracts, which meet all state and federal public procurement requirements. Ross Recreation Equipment is a vendor that has an agreement with NPP to provide and install park equipment. Daly City is a member of NPP as well. The fiscal impact, the total estimated construction cost for this project is $375,000, including the contract award of $243,336.39 to Ross Recreation Equipment. $75,413.61 will go to improvement park amenities, accessibility, and landscape, and 15% will be contingency. Sufficient funding for this project is available from per capita program grant of $244,645 and $130,355 of unallocated parkland dedication fees. That concludes my presentation, and staff is available to provide any additional information desired by the mayor or city council.
Thank you, Mr. Fornesi. We have Councilmember Glenn Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fornesi, I'm a little bit confused. Is this Polaris Park? Is it our land, or is this the one at the school to which they had a dedication of improvements about 2 years ago?
No, this is our property. The city owns a neighborhood park, which is just east of Bellevue in Southern Hills, and this is where the park is located on Polaris Drive, I believe, or Avenue.
Thank you so much. That answers my question, and thank you for all the work that was done and applying for the grant. And with a 20% match, I think this is a no-brainer, and I think we should move forward to, renovating our parks whenever and however we can. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One day with the Zoom, hand up, hand down. Anyway, so I just want to say, Mr. Fornesi, Mr. Chu, you guys are always knock it out. I don't want to use knock it out of the park, but you always make sure that our parks are taken care of, and that, it's so important because people need to be outside, and the children, and it is actually a well-used park in that neighborhood, in the neighborhoods. And that's all they have up in that area. So to make sure that they don't forget in Southern Hills is really great to give a lot of love and support for the children and the families is a beautiful thing to see. Looking forward to when it's done. And when's the estimated time, Mr. Fornesi?
We're expected to be completed in August, depending on availability of equipment, but we're looking at August, September.
Oh, perfect. Perfect weather.
Yeah.
So that'll be exciting. So thank you very much. Looking forward to it. All about those grants. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chu, Mr. Fornesi, for again getting this ball rolling. Parks are very, very important, especially if you have like young children like mine. They need to get out their energy. So with that, can I get anybody to
motion to approve?
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Justin Manalo, and a second by Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni. The city clerk, can we have a vote by roll call, please?
Mr. Buenaventura.
Aye.
Ms. Di Giovanni,
These are the top results.
Ms. Manalo,
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester,
Glenn Sylvester, aye.
Dr. Rod.
Aye.
Thank
So
you.
motion. Oh, thank you again. All right, proceeding next to our next agenda item, public appearances and communications. Are there any public appearance or oral communications? I'll hand it over to Ms. Leilani.
In accordance with the Brown Act laws governing regular meetings, the City Council is not authorized to speak to or take action on any other items in this meeting. Members of the public who wish to comment may click the raise hand feature to raise your hands to speak. For those joining by phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. It is important to note that staff will announce the name of the last person whose hand was raised upon calling for public comment, and that person will be the last verbal comment. If any additional speakers queue up after the last called speaker, the mayor may continue to allow public comment if time allows. Otherwise, public comment may be emailed to cityclerk@dalycity.org to be added to the record and shared with the City Council. When you hear your name called, staff will send you a request to unmute your microphone and you may begin speaking. Each person will receive a maximum of 2 minutes to speak and may only speak once. When your 2 minutes have been reached, we ask that you wrap up your comments. Speakers not in compliance will be muted. Any use of profanity will result in the speaker being muted immediately. It looks like we have 2 hands, 1 caller, and our last called speaker will be Bart. Caller, you can press *6 to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Your 2 minutes are beginning.
Perfect. Okay, so I have really, really good news for you guys. Really good news. You're going to be really happy about this. So this is our last appearance. This is actually my last appearance. So we're doing different projects and everything else. So we sort of want to even up with you guys. So first of all, Leilani, apologies for the profanity. You know, I could clearly see that upset you, and you know, definitely do want to reach out to you. You looked rather fearful, but very quickly I want to make mention. You guys are really doing well. You're progressing well. I haven't heard any racial comments or Pam on hold for 2 minutes, and you know, I think you guys are really progressing well. I'd like to see change in the police department. I'd like for us to sort of de-escalate to SWAT training. I want them to be more community orientated. I also want you guys to go to community meetings. I think that's critical. I think you guys need to do 3 or 4 meetings a month. And I'm involved in the community as well. You know, I know Mr. Sylvester, you were in the law enforcement. I actually have law enforcement in my family, and they actually know you. So, you know, I want to put in a good word about you, and I want to make sure that we're on the right page on this. Obviously, the veterans, and I have members in the fire department too, but you guys are doing well. You guys are doing good. Keep it up. I really want you guys to meet the community. I'll be down there. Perhaps we'll be down there sometime, and we'll meet up. And great job, city attorney. You're doing a great job keeping the flow moving. You know the law. You know good. You know the law well. And the Constitution, I'm going to quiz you on later on. So I'll be down there, and you know, maybe I'll ask you amendment number 17 or something like that. But you're doing good, progressing well. I'm going to be in coma, or we're going to be in coma later in the week and pay respects. Okay, be good. Bye.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Bart.
All right, I think I unmuted myself. Am I unmuted?
We can hear you, Bart.
Good evening, council members. My name is Bart Pantoja. I am the business manager, secretary treasurer for the San Mateo County Building and Construction Trades Council. I've been listening to your session. I appreciate everybody's diligence. I just want to introduce myself to the City Council. Hopefully in the near future, we'll have a conversation as I reach out to you as we move along. I wish you all the best this evening, and that'll be the end of my comments so that we can all carry on with our evening. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. That concludes public comment.
Thank you so much, Leilani. I appreciate it. Next on our agenda is appointments, board, commission, membership, committee appointments. Are there any board and commission appointments? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to council committee reports. Are there any council committee reports? All right. Well, I'll go ahead and share a couple. Let me get my notes out here. So I attended the Peninsula Clean Energy meeting on February 24th, 2022. We re-elected our chair and vice chair. We re-elected Rick DeGolia from Atherton, and also the vice chair, Donna Colson from Burlingame. I think they demonstrated great leadership over the past year, and I think that was like the general sentiment amongst all my colleagues on the Peninsula Clean Energy board. What else is there here? They shared some highlights about customer energy programs. So they have one program, it's a low-income home upgrade program, where there's programs that could serve 200 homes, income qualifying single-family homes over 2 years, to provide minor home repairs, energy upgrades, and electrification measures. And I think that was pretty important because when a lot of the shift towards more efficient and clean energy, it results to programs that are pretty costly. And I think this is a start to provide these type of programs for low-income programs to align itself with more clean initiatives. Also, we also talked about EV Ready program, where there was installation of 3,500 electric vehicle chargers over 4 years. Also, there's a big thing that I've been a part of. That's for the diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion for PCE. So we came to agreement with GCAP Services and Rosales Business Partners, and they'll be conducting all of our DAI work and services, hiring practices for PCE. I'm hyped for it. I'm so happy that we're able to bring along this group. We're going to be setting a precedent for many other community clean energy program or services such as PCE. So we're actually setting a precedent, setting a standard in what it means about social justice and equity, and providing more voices and inclusion to the process of what we do in PCE. And I just want to, this DEAI work stems from last year with the Black Lives Matters protests and George Floyd, and we wanted to recognize that it wasn't just a one offshoot move, but when we're talking about institutional change, this is one step to a larger goal of institutional change to include voices, seeing how we can address issues of equity, and I think that's about it. Oh, and I also attended Council of Cities, so congratulations to Councilmember Glenn Sylvester on being reappointed onto the HEART program again. So thank you for stepping up for Daly City and representing for our city. And that's about it for my council committee report. Are there any other council committee reports? Okay, seeing none. Let's go to number 16, City Council reports. Vice Mayor Ray Ventura.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So earlier this week, I think we all actually got it. We got a message from a constituent, a tweet that says, I'll read it to you exactly. It says, putting politics aside, can we fly the Ukrainian flag over City Hall to show the support the people of Daly City have for the Ukrainian people who are fighting in their right of independence and democracy? So I think that was that tweet or message. I thought it made me think, and then I started to look online, and I saw that the city of Richmond and also the city of Berkeley have already or are going to fly the Ukrainian flag. So there is precedent for it. I don't know if there's any statutory authority against it. And so given our President Biden's position on it, and that there are cities in our area who are already behind it, I think we should take that step and fly the flag ourselves over City Hall. I also think we should perhaps do a resolution condemning the attack on Ukraine at the same time. But I think immediately, I don't think we need to wait till the next council meeting to make, I don't think this needs a vote to fly the flag. But I'll defer to the city manager for your guidance, but I certainly think that's something that we should take on and do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I may just respond quickly to Vice Mayor's question. So I have been alerted to this request to several council members, and I can certainly understand it. I did have a consultation with the city attorney's office today. And as you all know, there are very specific flag rules that the city does not govern. Rose, if you'd like to chime in, my only logistical concern that's not from the legal perspective is just how long it may take for us to purchase a Ukrainian flag. So if the council wishes to go forward with this and Rose doesn't see an issue with it, I would just need some time to try to find a flag unless someone has access to one. So those are my administrative thoughts. And then I'm going to defer to Rose on the legal part.
Thank you, Shauna. So basically under, federal flag and state rules, we are allowed to fly the flag as a ceremonial basis. And what cities have done is to take the position to raise the flag for a limited duration. So for instance, I know it may be the city of Richmond or some other cities have indicated by proclamation or even direction from the council to fly the flag at 2 p.m. for an hour. It can't stay up there. It's very ceremonial, similar to what we've done in the flag raising with the Filipino flag. So with that respects, in terms of the logistics of that, we definitely can do that. But it definitely can't stay up there. It's more or less sort of a statement that we can make that we can fly the flag at 2 p.m. on Friday for a period of time. And notwithstanding, I know that the city manager would need to have to purchase the flag as well.
Good, thank you.
Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni.
Thank you. In that respect, of course, being from my background and the leader of that is Jewish of the Ukraine has been very encouraged. I'm happy to hear that we need to do something. And Rose, when a flag is flown side by side, because I know we have 2 flag poles, right? Isn't there one as a visitor and one so it's different rules if you can do that across the street at Daly City Partnership versus being at City Hall? I know we don't have an extra flagpole here, but is there any difference in the time limit if they're flown side by side?
We don't have a flag custom or rules, and I don't believe the custom is that the Ukrainian flag cannot take precedent over the federal and the state flags. So if you had, for instance, 3 flagpoles in that respect, it should not fly in duration concurrently with the federal. And these are customs, of course. I mean, I don't believe that people are going to come after us. But that is the custom, is that they should not take precedent over the federal and state flags unless there's a directive from the president or the governor to do so. So that's why when I say ceremonial in that respect, there's no written rule. It's just that it should not fly indefinitely for, so when I say short duration period of time, it sort of justifies the ceremonial aspect of the statement we want to make with the flying of the flag.
Yeah, and I definitely support the proclamation to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian and his people. And I think it's a good show of our human rights and then how we stand on our democracy. So I appreciate that. And look forward to that being put together. So thank you, Mayor, but I also have these are city council reports. So first of all, we had celebrated our Black History Month. Several of us were there with Leslie DuBridges that always heads it, and our recreation, amazing people. And she dedicated it to her beloved sister, Risa, who had passed away. And in this Black History Month, we knew it was 30-year anniversary, which is pretty remarkable. And great people in our community were there, such as Ike Elliott, who told of his story and the racism that he faced in Daly City. I even spoke with a lady there that even in the Westlake area at that time, sadly had a cross burned in her front yard. And so we won't forget. And Will, who sang beautiful hymn songs, the exercise ladies, the fabulous. I mean, so much energy. It was fabulous. It was really done well. There was a duel at the little park of history that we need to remember from an abolitionist at that park, and that they actually had a duel, and obviously one of them was killed. And in Daly City, we have a lot of that, and we need to remember that, recognize it, so that we can move forward and not repeat it. So I think that thanking Denise and everybody in Recreation, especially Leslie DuBridges, who her and her mother and her sister have done this for 30 years. And that's quite a long time. And the second council report that I have is, I believe, let me get down here. Oh, the Recreation Commission meeting, which thank you to the mayor for allowing us to swear in our commissioners. That you'll be proud of both of them. Hamilton Anawahi, which I'll defer to Councilmember Jocelyn, who she appointed, and I appointed Saul Morenda. And it turns out they all knew each other. As you know, Mr. Mayor, Nate and everyone, they all grew up together. So it was kind of nice to see and hear that some of them are employed by us and some of them are sitting on the commissions now together, like in a full circle. So it was kind of like a beautiful moment that our programs have developed these nice young people who become serving now willfully with much love and dedication in our community. I thought it was a really beautiful moment to look at all of them, including the Nate, and who's now the chair, and Christina Luna, who has joined that. So I thought that was a beautiful full circle in those two respects. So I just wanted to say that the senior presentation from Ann Cooney and from everyone there, Angelo, was fabulous, telling how many meals we served. They hired 2 people to help the seniors. And it's so exciting. As city manager, she works directly with them and has done a great job with her leadership and making sure that they're all taken together and how they're now transitioning back, but that the beat still continues for our community, our seniors, our youth, and that the youth are now as a focus as well, and our community. So it's great to do that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was really beautiful, really beautiful. We were really proud to be in Daly City, and we have those commissioners are just fabulous. It was beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni. Councilmember Glenn Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no report to give. However, I rose my hand so I can continue the dialogue regarding the flag. As our city attorney made mention, it's more of a ceremonial position that we are taking. However, I feel that we need to show our support in being against what is happening and what's being done by the other country. So to answer the question, I did look up flag importer. That's flagsimporter.com. And you can purchase a Ukraine flag 3 by 5 feet polyester for $10.95. So I recommend that we move forward with this post haste. And what we haven't discussed is, for what duration. If I'm not mistaken, flag protocol is generally from dusk to dawn. I would at least make a recommendation that we fly the Ukrainian flag at a minimum of once a week for as long as this war continues. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Glenn Sylvester. Councilmember Jessamine Manalo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak. I think that, first and foremost, thank you, Council Member, Vice Mayor Benaventura, for bringing forth this to our City Council reports and raising the Ukrainian flag. And I think that, if anything, what has transpired from this discussion is an opportunity to stand in solidarity and really be able to say that this is not right. And we as, just in the humanitarian form, just what's happening is outrageous. And so I am in full support of being able to raise the flag. And it seems like there's just some logistical pieces to this. And so I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. And then also in regards to just the City Council report, I want to say that it was actually such an amazing day on the celebration for Black History and Cultural Month, in which has been happening for 30 years. I think, it's always important to highlight the amazing history just across the nation, and also, in our local communities, and hearing from our local, I would say definitely heroes and heroines that had the courage to be able to speak up. And it's just amazing to speak up around equity and justice, and also be able to, even within the city of Daly City, rise up and be in support of one another when, unfortunately, there was discrimination that had happened, right? And so it was also wonderful to see the young generation being there. And I know, Mr. Mayor, you had Razan with you. I think that's always so amazing to see, just intergenerational programming that, the recreation and park staff put on, in just you can tell their zest and their passion. And then also to see the local neighbors just also just come by. And so I know that we haven't had many in-person events, but that was a hybrid, which was amazing, and also outdoors. And so hoping that as things get better, we're able to see one another more so, because I know that's also a piece of community that people want to engage in. So amazing work to the staff as always. And it was definitely a beautiful moment in Daly City that was just last Saturday, right? It's just crazy how time flies, and you're like, there's so many things that happened, but that was just last Saturday. Also just want to remind everyone about this DC PLA luncheon that's happening. I know that annually the March 17th St. Patrick's, their famous luncheon and their fundraiser is occurring. And so it seems like we're in a better place. And so really hoping that if you are able to support this amazing organization that I know has been coined as the gift that keeps on giving. And so I know that's when I see a lot of community members out there wearing their green from all across the board. So just wanted to support DCPLA and let the community know. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Justin Manalo. Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni, go for it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I wanted to thank Mr. Councilmember Sylvester. However, I do suggest that we contact the Consul General of Ukraine for the flag, because albeit you can get flags online, we definitely want to make sure that those flags are not made in another country that supports what is going on. And the majority, if you get on Amazon or whatever, they're either made by the China or lack of human rights or another country. If we contact the Consul General of Ukraine in San Francisco, he would know in their office where to get one, where it would be made in a humane manner, and it would definitely not be made by a country that is supporting such evil at this particular moment. So I think that's really important. And if we wanted to invite, even though they're in the middle and probably they wouldn't be able to join us, but if my colleagues would like to either invite their office or representative or someone, I'm sure they would be deeply, very humbled, even if it's by Zoom or have you. I don't know, Mr. Mayor, you can check out their schedule and see, which one is appropriate for them. And having known the history, as we all know from World War II, where many of us had, oh my God, I can't even talk right now, but the millions of Jews that in the Holocaust perished, got on a train and never came back. And now all the ethnic groups have come together in Ukraine, which is a beautiful thing, and have become one in the, to fight. I think that in itself says a lot. So I really appreciate that. If you guys could check into getting the flag via that way, because the other countries and their leaders are, as we know, support the evil. Thank you very much. It's very emotional. Thank you.
Councilmember Glenn Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's an excellent idea to at least contact the Consul General of Ukraine. I just checked the website, and we cannot surmise as to who manufactures the flags. Whether it's coming from China, or we don't know. And I'm thinking about, blood diamonds. So I think contacting the Consul General would be a great idea. I just went back onto the website to order, and it says sold out. Wow. So apparently, I guess there's other people who are thinking the same. So I think Consul General, and maybe we might get priority as a city. Yeah. So just my comment. Thank you, and thank you for the recommendation, Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Great, thank you, everybody. I think just drawing upon my colleagues and our shared sentiment of what's going on in the Ukraine, I'm all in support of it as well. But going back to the Black History Month celebration and talking about health and the education that we received there, I just want to remind everybody this is like the last day of Black History Month, but then just to remind everybody that Black History Month is made every single day of every week, and it's American history. And, to continue to learn about the issues that are going on with the Black community in parallel with the BIPOC communities. So with that, let's go proceed to the staff reports, or any staff reports. City Manager Shauna Maltby.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to assure the council that I already have staff researching the flag situation. We should have an answer to you by tomorrow, keeping all of your concerns and comments in consideration. So just wanted to give that update. Other than that, nothing else tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shauna, which leaves us off to the adjournment in memory. We have one. We have Uwini Iosa, who's Water and Wastewater Resources Department Collection System Operator 2, who's Sam Iosa's sister. And then I'll hand it over to Councilmember Pamela DiGiovanni.
Thank you. Unfortunately, this one came in a kind of late. First of all, I would like to adjourn in memory of actually our beloved Leslie DuBridge's sister, who passed away on December 30th of 2021. It was born January 7th, 1943. She was a major supporter with Sarah Pay and Daly City staff in launching the Black History Month for over 30 years. With a cultural enthusiastic, 35+ years as a HR, and she was a talent management professional, former San Francisco Human Rights Commissioner. She was an adjunct professor at UC Berkeley, lived for a short time while in Daly City, and moved down to the coast of Montero before she passed away. And it was dedicated to her the other day. Also, I would like to defer to Councilmember Sylvester of the sad, tragic traffic stop that took the life of Officer Jorge Alvarado, only 30 years old. And I'll defer to, out of respect for law enforcement and to all the law enforcement, condolences.
Councilman Berkeley. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, thank you, Councilmember DiGiovanni. As you made mention, this was a last minute development, but it's very tragic. And this officer was killed while conducting a traffic stop. And many officers die in the line of duty, but this one was so tragic that our Governor Newsom has ordered flags to fly at the Capitol at half staff. So he's at Salinas PD, and it's my understanding he used to work at Colma PD. So if we can adjourn in memory of him, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
With all those, let's provide a moment of silence. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe rest of February, and we'll see you in March. Thank you, everyone.
Prayers for Ukraine, right?
Prayers for Ukraine.